Welcome to Mental Health Monthly with Dan DeGryse and Chris Muscle.
All right, welcome to another edition of Mental Health Monthly. My name is Dan DeGryse and my co-host Chris Muscle out of McKinney, Texas. Chris, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. So wherever you're at, whenever you're watching this, welcome. Today we're going to talk to a good friend of mine of 35 years, Tim Gibbons, retired battalion chief out of Chicago, and really just going to have a discussion with Timmy about his journey in the fire service in the Chicago Fire Department, journey in recovery, and offer some tidbits on 40 years in recovery, Tim.
Yes.
So welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you guys.
Yeah, Timmy and I have had many conversations about each other. We met back in, 1989, 1990.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
And before I get into his bio, which I'm going to actually just share because we've been brothers for, 35 years, it started with this picture right here up on a roof on the west side of Chicago where he was telling me what I needed to do. As a young buck on the west side on truck 35, we were on the roof that we pretty much burned the whole roof off of it. And he was like, come on, kid, let me show you what to do and take this and throw it out. And I don't know if you were much older than me. I mean, you are older than me, but you were on squad 2 and, the elite squad units. And that's what those guys did, right? Tell us young guys what to do. How did I do? Did I listen?
Did he pass?
Probably not, but over time, your skills did actually develop nicely. You had some great tutors on Truck 35. We were just supplementing that day.
Yeah. Great relationship, right? I mean, and not the story tell, but 96, 97 firehouses, 96 engines, and then 56 trucks, 4 squads, and everybody's vying for that first in. So where sometimes that can be adversarial, we became fast friends because of that friendship. And then also, honestly, to get serious, right? I have a background, obviously, in behavioral health, and you have a background in recovery, and we came together mutually in conversations with that, which led to 30 plus years while I ran the Chicago Firefighters Union EAP. You were boots on the ground as peer support and mentor for many, not only in firefighting, but those that were led astray or looking for a path. And you offered it to them either personally or professionally, referring to me or vice versa, to be that person to, step up and help. With that said, right, I mean, life is a journey in itself. And currently, if you look at the statistics out there in regards to work-related stress or life stressors, there's statistics out there that say that about 80% of personnel have work-related stress, which is, good stress, eustress, bad stress, distress. But for generally, and I think you included, and I think Chris as well, and hopefully many people out there, you look forward to going to work every day. I did every single day. We were exposed to critical incidences, but we managed those. When things happen to people around us, that's closer to home. And are we splashed by it? And how do we support our friends and coworkers to help reduce that internal stress response? You did that both for yourself, for others, at all ranks throughout your career. And this conversation today is really going to be a positive one, because a lot of times when people talk about whether it be substance use or mental health, it could be potentially a Debbie Downer. I have you on here because you truly, from a familial standpoint, a work standpoint, and a entrepreneur yourself, is truly a success story. And I know you're probably thinking, is this Dan talking to me, or is this somebody else talking to me? Because like, where is the floor going to drop out here? But it's not. 35 years of kidding each other. It's like, oh, was he setting me up for? No, but truly, to give a little bio for Tim, married, 2 kids, worked his way up the ranks from, just a regular firefighter to an elite squad, then making lieutenant, captain, and battalion chief. And I know Tim's thinking this and won't say it, but I'll say it. He goes, he beat me on every test. You see him, he's smiling. Yes, he did. So in a sense, when people look at people that are working their way through journey of recovery, they can get a title of alcoholic or addict, and that couldn't be further from the truth. And Tim, like many people that I've met, are highly intelligent, highly motivated when they put their heads to it. Not only did he achieve, getting on one of the squads in the city of Chicago, but the rank of battalion chief, but also ran a business that was a multi-million-dollar business entity across many states. And forgive me, you received an award, I think about 4 or 5 years ago. What was that title?
Snow Magazine honored me with CEO of the Year back in 2013.
Yeah. And boy, time flies, right? I said 4 or 5 years ago and 12 years ago. Hence the beard, the lack of hair for me, and lack of memory. But so that's a little bio about Tim and why I have him here. And so, like many people, and this is what's cool about it, is Tim's available for anybody and everybody. Obviously people have to take care of themselves, but as I have met people and looking for a peer supporter or a mentor or somebody to guide them through it, Tim's honestly one of the first person that I think about. And I always chat with him, make sure you don't have too much on your plate. And very seldom, if any, ever did Tim ever say no. And he said, at least I'll have a conversation with him. And if I'm overloaded, I'll find somebody else in the recovery world, which I think everybody knows I'm not in recovery, even though I know a lot of people, and Tim goes to a lot of meetings, so that he has a wider net and can help and but refer to others. So it's been a great relationship, me and Tim, again, from day one in the fire service to playing each other in a round of golf, being each other's teammate until he decided to spend 6 or 7 months in Florida, which he, again, beat me at retirement. And want to have a conversation with Tim about, what recovery looks like, what long-term recovery looks like, because there's probably many people out there that are wondering how to find it, how to maintain it, or somebody that's looking to offer somebody direction. So hopefully I did okay with your bio there. That's pretty personal. I didn't get into anything negative. Other than $1 you probably still owe me.
Yet.
What you and we're playing today, so we might play for that $1 again. What's your thoughts, Tim, We talked a little bit before the show and what I offered you. What gives you gratitude through your bio?
I tell you what, I think I got the right shirt on today because you just mentioned gratitude, and I'm a count my blessings kind of guy, and give appreciation where appropriate. You've been a part of my recovery, and my respect for you as a mental health professional is unrivaled. We've interacted a lot over the years, and some of those people that come to me, I immediately call you in the need of a medical intervention or a more objective third-party professional opinion. You've frequently been my go-to guy. In short, I came on the job young. I brought a lot of personal baggage to the job. And actually, I brought that personal baggage to my first drink, probably. And I experienced some kind of relief or satisfaction from drinking that I kept pursuing. And it took me to places I never intended to be. It created, it masked or exacerbated existing problems and created new ones. In short order, by my early 20s, when I was the kid who couldn't get to work on time, and I was all often suffering from half man syndrome when I was there, because I still had the effects of my intoxicants in me, residually or active. And it was just not good. And fortunately, it got bad enough that I was willing to reach out for help. And the Chicago Fire Department is really wonderful in providing support to those who want it. There are many people who need it and won't get it because they don't have the willingness to do what it takes or the self-honesty to accept what reality is. Fire department was pretty strong in that. I had guys like Danny as the director of the employee assistance program for our local 2. We also had some pretty dedicated professionals on the city side of things. So whatever your flavor was, you could reach out. And I had a lot of confidence in Danny's ability to not only refer people in the proper direction and give them the guidance based on his professional experience, but I could send people to him with the confidence that, everyone's worried about confidentiality and, oh my God, I can't say this and that. And, I could say with great confidence that when I would assure people that anything they discuss with Dan would stay in the confines of that. They might not like what he is going to tell them they need to do, but he's going to give them good guidance and direction. And then beyond the professional intervention, medically or environmentally, of separating the substance abuser from their chemical, their ongoing recovery is mandatory. And that comes down to the willingness of the individual. Are you really sick and tired of being sick and tired? And that's one of those things that comes and goes. Oftentimes, we step into situations that are troublesome, whether it's at home or work or both or everywhere, financial, romantic, employment related. And then we're just looking to dodge those consequences. And
You
then
mentioned a certain thing like sick and tired of being sick and tired, and a lot of people will talk about bottoms, and I think when I talk to people that are trying to understand that piece, right? For when I gave your bio, you've been very successful, right? You did not lose the job, and we won't necessarily get into that because some people have lost a job, have lost their family, have lost all the money they've had, they've lost their freedom.
Yes.
But the people that find recovery didn't lose hope. And what does that entail? And I think for you, so if you don't mind, like I remember talking to one person that says, what do I have to do to hit my bottom? And I said, that's individualistic in each person. You don't have to take the elevator to the super bottom basement. It's to have a desire to change. And you kind of said it as sick and tired of being sick and tired. What was that for you?
Well, it was, I had not yet experienced serious discipline around the job, but it was coming. I got married young. I had a child. I was not a responsible husband, father, employee, self-centered to the extreme. Along with that, I was caught up in the compulsion to drink and use, and became my primary focus, a need, if you will. I didn't have physical withdrawal symptoms really from my drinking, but I did suffer from the phenomenon of craving, and the ego would tell me, as a man child in America, I was to be John Wayne. I was, drink whiskey all day and knock people out with one punch and conquer all my problems single-handedly. When I found out later, the paradox is true. I don't do much without the help of others. And it's getting through that ego thing and that shame thing to ask for help and to sincerely accept the help. It's incredible how many people are out there who've been through what I've been through, that are willing to share and support you in those changes without any compensation to them on their part.
With that, and I hate to interrupt you, but my thought process, right, is, and I didn't write it down, so I'll forget it. I'm trying to think early in your career, because I know the department, and I know the people that are in recovery, and they'll freely offer it to you. And that's really anywhere, but in our department, it was pretty solid. Fortunately or unfortunately, we had a lot of people that found recovery. How many people offered you a word of wisdom before you said, I probably should take one of those lines?
Many family and work. And, one of the big symptoms of alcoholism, which I identify with having, is denial. People would say, hey, you have a problem. I'd say, I don't have a problem. You have a problem. You're my problem. Blah, blah, blah. And then as the denial system was breaking down by reality, in emotion, in the self-loathing, really, that I was feeling at the end, that I was not living the life I was capable of living. I was not being the person that I really felt I was. And those phenomenon helped wear down that denial. And I got to a point where I say, okay, maybe I do have a problem, but I'll fix it myself. And that was a fool's errand. And then that eventually led to, okay, maybe you're right. I'll look into getting some help. And I did. And I went into a 28-day treatment program on my own, and I got separated from the environment and the substances I was using, and physically, mentally, and I got educated about what alcoholism is and what recovery. Not only is it possible, but what does it look like in other people's lives? And I began to separate myself from that world that I had confined myself to. I was not initially, I was not quite 100% ready to accept all the concepts. I kind of wanted to stand in the checkout line and pick and choose, which is very, very common. But I had a head full of AA, and I had a head full of knowledge that, if I was compelled to pick up a drink, that I knew it was wrong, that it didn't fit in my world, and it wasn't how I wanted to go through life anymore, because I could not safely predict where one drink would take me. And, maybe one day I'd get away with it, and maybe the next day it would turn into a 3-day bender and I'm not at work, and I don't know, crashed a car, went to the ER, got locked up for, assault or some other nonsense that's available to me out in that world. But, when I was exposed to recovery, I saw that it worked. It worked for other people. The question was, could I make it work for me? And was I willing to do the work of self-examination and changing of playgrounds and playmates to stay out of that place that I was so comfortable in? And as a young man, I was 23 years old. I thought my life was going to end. It would be over. I would never date another girl. I would never, have fun again. All those things that I associated with that lifestyle would be taken away. And the reality is, all of those things that I enjoyed not only returned, they expanded. I went back to school. I finished my degree. I studied hard for promotion exams. We trained. I mean, our early time together, with your truck 35 being a mile away from our quarters at Squad 2, we did a lot of work together. We did a lot of training together. We built a camaraderie around that. I needed to build a camaraderie in recovery as well, because I learned to become dependent on the help of those other people, which was very contrary to my personality. I come from a place where asking for help is a sign of weakness, but yet it's a source of infinite strength.
Yeah. I think a couple of things, Simi, when you break it down, right, for somebody that's been through it, or they're going through it, or they're not sure if they need to go down that road, right, is we talk about rock bottom, or whatever. Everybody has, maybe not everybody, but people usually have a significant event or something that gets them there, right? So there's that rock bottom element, insert whatever words you want to call it, the acceptance, right, that you do need to do something different. And then you have to be willing to take or ask for the help, right? And you said earlier that, Chicago had a really good EAP program and they would help you, but you have to be willing, right? And so whatever your situation or event is that gets you to that point, that's a step, right? It could be step one in a sense. Step two is accepting that I have this situation, right? You might not have to accept right away all the changes that are going to come with it. You probably don't even know the changes that are going to come with it, right? And then you have to be willing to take the help, it's hard, especially for people in our profession, right? Firefighters, police officers, military. I'm obviously a firefighter. I was military, right? And to your point, the last thing, I didn't have a problem. Everyone else had a problem, right? I mean, like, I didn't have the problem. And so I think that's the initial part of it, is understanding that. And there's a lot of, you said some of the words, shame, guilt. Those are all the things that are going through your head, right? Initially. But I think the bigger thing for people to know is wherever you are in that current situation, you said it. I know I've said it before on other shows, like, it's not sustainable. Something's got to change, right? In order for us to be healthy and happy and have a good career and family and all those elements, right? And then the other thing that I would add to that, or ask you about, something that I talk about is, when you go through recovery, when you first come out the other side, whether it's you get discharged from inpatient, or you've been sober 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever that looks like, you're on top of the world, right? Because you made it one day, you made it 2 days, you made it 3 days. But those initial phases, it's not easy, right? It will get easier with time, but it's not easy. Like, recovery is not easy. Like, let's just be honest about it. Like, it gets easier with time, but that initial, I don't know, it's 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, right? And guess what? All those things that you were dealing with are still going to happen. The bad runs, the arguing with the wife, the kids, all those things are still going to happen. But now we've removed the supplement that we've used to numb it, right?
Yeah. It's, quite simply that when I spoke to people, sponsors or people who had time in recovery, and they said, what do I have to change? And the short answer is everything, but it all doesn't have to be done immediately. The first thing we do is we get away from the numbing agent, right? And then from that, we can begin to see what other thought patterns, behaviors, habits are troublesome in our life. Am I a gambler, right? And is gambling a symptom of my compulsiveness as well? And does that have to go? Did I suffer from an inability to be in a true relationship with another human being? Yeah, I did, because drugs and alcohol were my best friend, and now I'm going to have to interact, on a more honest level with other people. I had to learn how to be in relationship with the woman that's still my wife, who I met 38 years ago. She's never seen me drunk, but she's seen me alcoholic. There are certain, known behaviors and other symptoms of the disease of alcoholism or addiction that go along with the substance use.
So when we talk about, like, making this change, right? Because it is you're essentially changing your life, right? In the way that you live daily, inside the job, outside the job, right? Maybe talk about some of those changes. And I think the cool thing about this is it doesn't require a lot of money. It doesn't require a program. It doesn't require a degree, right? You don't have to learn a new trade to make these changes. These are all things that somebody that's either living in this, gone through it, or will go through it, right? These are things I could change on my own. I know for me, right? It's like changing what I call my inner circle. You said it earlier, right? Your playground and your playmates, right? What does my daily routine look like? Am I taking care of myself? Am I investing back into my family? All those were things that I could change without all those, not a lot of effort, I guess is what I'm saying. But what did that kind of look like for you?
It was a challenge, but it was kind of liberating. I had to get the courage. I'm a big, tough fireman. I crawled down burning hallways for a living. I thought that was the definition of courage. Sometimes it was just walking up and extending a hand and saying, "Hi, my name is Tim. What's yours?"
Yeah.
That's a courageous act. Walking into, a recovery meeting is an act of courage, and saying, I'm saying, I cannot do this alone. I need help, and I'm willing to help you do it too. Let's walk this path together. I went back and applied myself to areas risking failure in ways that I did not do earlier in my life. I trained to box. Now you talk about a solitary action. When you're going in between the ropes to face an opponent who's there to knock your head off, you're hoping you did all your homework before you got in there, in dedicating myself to things like my physical fitness, my mental health, my pursuit of a spiritual base, the act of studying for 12 months for the next promotion test, and getting in a group like with Dan. I mean, Dan and I chide each other about who scored what, but I would not have succeeded on any of those tests without him and my other study partners to get me there. In an understanding and an appreciation of what's available to me if I'm willing to show up and ask for help, actively or passively, is virtually unlimited. I not only redeemed myself in a career where I was floundering, to put it mildly, but I achieved some good success. I was able to pass that on. I trained over 600 recruits at the Quinn Fire Academy over time. I'm very proud of that. Those people are captains and chiefs and now coming off the job. And I ran into one yesterday in a gas station, and they just had a wonderful exchange with them. And, that kind of satisfaction is only available because I'm sober. Because I showed up and did the work, and I can only maintain it by continuing to show up and support others that are struggling. Whether they've been sober for a week or 2 years, that's become my obligation.
Yeah. And I'm sure Dan has a question or two, but I want to hit on this real quick before I forget.
It's his way of telling me as the host to shut my pie
Jump
hole.
in.
Yeah.
The millennial. I would just say, hold on, Chris. Go ahead.
Here we go. So I know he'll roll his eyes when I say this, but how important is it? I know what it is for me to have somebody like Dan, right? When you're in recovery, you talk about having, your recovery network. So other people that have experienced alcoholism, sobriety, but to have that, whether it's a counselor, mental health professional, right? Whether you go sit in a counseling room once a week, you have that person that you can call, because there's the two part, right? You want to talk to people that have walked walked a mile in your shoes, right? Mm-hmm. But then there's that way smarter than us, educated person that has a background in that, right? Obviously, Dan sounds like he's been that for you. I know he's that for me. But I guess what I'm getting at is oftentimes, right, with alcohol, there's the PTS and PTSD, whatever you call it, right? They almost coincide with each other in our profession, right? And so having the recovery, that element, and people, your friends that have walked that to bounce stuff off of, but how important is the mental health professional in that whole equation for recovery?
Well, there's certain things. I have a sponsor, and I sponsor other people, and I try to limit my discussions on, in their recovery as they relate to their alcoholism.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily qualified to give advice on the romantic level or the financial level. Seek out professionals in those areas as well. I have a good luxury, my exposure to Dan. I have casual opportunity to speak with a trained mental health professional, and we often do, about things like to better understand suicide. Dan was central to bringing suicide awareness to the forefront when there was a spike in our career of firefighter suicides. And he carries that message well. So if there's somebody, with suicidal ideations going on, I'm not in a position to offer the solution. But again, to direct to the trained professional is critical. But again, that's asking for help in ways that I could not do when I was drinking.
Right.
It was contrary to, the way I operated. I thought I was supposed to have those answers. And that's the biggest flaw in that kind of thinking. There's help available, and it's within reach. If we can get past the denial and the ego or the fear to look for it, it's all around us.
It's neat. Is one of the sayings that I want to make this again. This is positive, right? So when people think about recovery and they think about the fire service, there's been a lot of conversation about suicide or PTSD or alcoholism, and we're all going to end up getting one or all of those or dying. And that's couldn't be further from the truth with this conversation. When I hear Tim speak and I hear other people that have significant recovery, they don't have the pirate disease. And I call the pirate disease is the it's I. When you do say I, you're taking accountability. And those people that are struggling with changing a direction, that I is that ego. And you've spoken about that multiple times. And I often say with the Serenity Prayer, right, there's a reason wisdom is the third part of that, that mantra in a sense, because it takes time. And, for you at 23-ish to get recovery at that time. And that's why I asked you, how many times did you kind of say no to, verbally or non-verbally, that you weren't willing to accept the help? It can happen, but as Chris said, you got to be willing to do that. The other side of it is that there's got to be people, mentors that like Jerry Hutchinson, God rest his soul, who he was the pioneer. People will call me, use that word with me. I'm not the pioneer. I'm an old guy now, but Jerry Hutchinson in our department was the pioneer that dates back into the 70s, that was willing to say, I have an issue, I got help, and freely give it to whoever was willing to accept it. Now, the reality is not everybody accepted it. Right. Me and him had many of those conversations, and there's three ends to the people that aren't willing to take it, right? Jail, institution, and death. And it's a miserable life. My father got recovery for 29 years, and his closest friends were not necessarily his coworkers, but those people that helped him in recovery. The fortunate thing that we had in our department, I think, has the same thing with McKinney, and many that may be listening or unfortunately not there yet, is peer support, table talk, favorable table talk. And like you said, is you don't do it alone. You stay in your lane. You know what you are capable of, but it's even more important, just like when we would sit around the kitchen table to find out who's a good roofer and who's not a good roofer, stay away from the bad roofers and go with the good roofer, is a guy or a gal in that arena. And when you can handle it, you did. And this is for everybody out there, including myself and Chris, is know our limitations, but surround yourself with the best team that you possibly can. One thing that I was listening to, and I'm a country music guy, but I don't understand the lyrics, but I do remember one thing is they say it's similar to recovery, is like when you play it backwards, when you stop the addiction, you pretty much get everything back you lost and more. So all those people out there that are country music fans, if you, and those are struggling with recovery, you do. And that's how we started the conversation, right, Tim? Is I didn't know you back then when you were 23, because I think I was 3 years old. You knew the shot across the bow was happening.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it happens.
Usually it gives me a hard time for saying stuff like that.
I waited about 30 minutes to do that. And it wasn't pre-planned.
That's how I know he cares.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If I was serious this whole hour, and when we go golf, he'd be like, who are you? I lost my train of thought, but no, the purpose of this conversation is to understand the power of the conversation and what happens at that kitchen table in the fire service, and how many lives that probably has affected in a favorable way. And so anybody that's listening, I ask everybody is that we have to bust each other's stuff to show that we care. If we're, and I'll just leave it at that. But if you don't have the kitchen table, that is one protective factor that is necessary, I think, for long-term recovery from anything. Fair?
Yeah. Yeah. There's got to be, at some point we have to become vulnerable. Okay. Which is kind of contrary. Okay. We all like to put up our walls and our masks for our own personal safety. But I found when I become vulnerable with other people, and they will respond and they will share their experience with me, and I won't feel so alone. And when I look at the success they've achieved, or the fact that they've stayed away from a drink, I get hope that it can work for me. Because some of my issue in early sobriety, and still comes in and out of my life today, is a low self-esteem based on that aforementioned shame and guilt that, says I'm not worth it. Okay. They're worth it, but I'm not. Well, that kind of twisted thinking needs to be amended. Some of that was my religious upbringing, where I carried that kind of guilt and shame and remorse. And I have a different understanding of spirituality today than was given to me by any church organization. And I don't look down on church people in any way. I think there's many paths that are going the same place. Mine is not so much an organized religion as it is the principles of recovery that I try to live by today. Because if I'm not living a life with some kind of guidance, I'm probably setting myself up for heartache and potential relapse.
I don't know if everybody caught what you said, and a lot of good words, but the thing I didn't write it down, but I have it in my head. So low self-esteem. I've done this show with Chris for a little less than a year. I've done Hump Day Hangout, had a lot of people on the shows, have had many conversations, and you just talked about vulnerability. and I don't think you intended, but it was in a conversation. You said that you suffer from low self-esteem. I think about like the firehouse, and I think about the fire scene, or any classes that we would take. I don't think anybody in my entire life has ever said, I suffer from low self-esteem, but the majority of us probably suffer from low self-esteem. So I'm thinking, including myself, and I'm sure Chris, to some degree, and not in a bad way, but that's a natural thing, right? It's, but we don't have that conversation, and that freely came out of your mouth, not in a negative way. And I don't mean this to be from a negative standpoint. The cool thing is with all the stuff that you have achieved, right? From your fire career, from your personal career, your family and your business career, people probably would be like, how does he suffer from low self-esteem? And not to say you suffer from it, but you have it. And I'm assuming over the last 40 years that has popped up in that. And all I know is that when I talk to you, and you haven't talked about that much, but you'll say, yeah, I got a meeting at 6:00 that I have to go to. Or you, like yesterday, right? You said somebody reached out to you to ask you to chair it, and you're going tonight. For you to speak, I know is as important. You receive something back, and that's the collective engagement of others. I'm using that example that it's okay to be vulnerable in the right group, because you typically, I know you've shared in our conversations, right? Even if you've asked me something, we both get something back because it's that connection, right? So by being vulnerable, if somebody picks on you because of that, you're probably not going to have a conversation, or you're going to use that boxing technique or that Taekwondo and right the ship. But you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I try to refrain from those emotional reactions to things. And
You still think about it.
Yeah. It's I don't have a drinking problem today, but I still have a thinking problem, and trying to stay in the right environment and around the right people is very important. I have a new tribe today. I was quite proud to be a professional firefighter. It brought me a lot of personal and professional satisfaction. And I'm still involved in that fellowship of firefighters to some extent, but I'm involved in another fellowship consistently where we're just people, trying to do the right thing, and I find that if I'm doing the right things, I'm less inclined to want to go out and numb my brain out and risk my life by engaging in drinking and drugging. It doesn't work. I mean, I proved it conclusively, but I need continuous reminders of, acceptance. I think Chris brought that up earlier, the acceptance of who and what I am. I'm just another kind of, I'm a bozo on the bus, and, that's okay. That's okay. I don't have to be above, and I certainly don't want to consider myself below anyone else. Just kind of shoulder to shoulder, like when we went to work at a fire scene. We each had a job to do, and we did it to the best of our ability. And it wasn't always perfect, but then we would debrief and say, that went okay, but pretty good. But what could we have done better? So that's an aspect that's incorporated in my recovery too, where I take a look and see what's my behavior up to today. Is this taking me where I want to be, or is this getting in the way of that?
So general question is, in your career, you've been to many retirement ceremonies and parties, promotional parties, Christmas parties and all that, right? Mm-hmm. In the fire service, alcohol is there, right? There's a lot of them. You mentioned, right? People, places, and things changing your group. But I know you attended a lot of events. So for somebody that's in short term or going into long term or thinking about recovery and going, oh, I could never go to a bar again. I could never go to a promotional party again, or I got to slip out. And maybe that's the case. What was your, because we've talked about this.
This is a great question, because every recovering alcoholic will be projecting, they may have a 3-year-old daughter. Oh my God, how am I going to do the toast at her wedding in 20 years? Mm. Right? Let's worry about today. I had to learn how to interact in those things, because I very much wanted to be a part of that social scene. Okay. And I don't have a problem going to bars and parties if I have a legitimate reason to be there. A sporting event, somebody's retirement that I want to be there to honor. But I had to develop some skills around it. In my personal philosophy on this is I get there early, before the alcohol is really flowing. I work the room. I meet and greet people and, congratulate the honorees, and I engage and I'm interactive. And, at any given point, if I become uncomfortable because the noise level is up, the volume is up, the intoxication is growing, I get uncomfortable around that, and I just kind of exit stage left very quietly. And people have come to know me for that, So I've showed up, I've interacted with everybody, I lived up to the obligation and the desire to be there. And then I won't be closing the place in most cases. Those days are in the past, not only for sobriety, but for years on this earth. And I go home earlier.
So I think for those that are listening, the way that I interpret that, which is absolutely needed for someone in recovery, is boundaries, right? You have boundaries. I think that's just a easy way. And boundaries for everybody is different. In situations, they can even be situational, like you said, right? But yeah, I think having boundaries is key.
Yeah. Also, like in a fire service, right? You got to have two second means of egress.
Right.
And the best laid plan has an exit strategy, and you pre-plan that. It doesn't happen by accident, because we've had that conversation in the past. Because I know you've shown up, and hopefully I'm not giving anything away, because there's my dad for a little while, who had 29 years of recovery, started drinking non-alcoholic. And, somebody sees somebody in recovery drinking a Budweiser or whatever it is. They're like, oh, wait, what happened? And they're like, no, no alcohol content. You like the taste. That should be okay.
Well, I don't advocate it for people in early sobriety. I do have like a Heineken 0.0 on occasion, like a 90-degree day like we're looking at today. There's a good chance I'll have a Heineken 0 at the end of the golf round. But I don't pretend drink. I also find it easier to keep a drink in my hand, often seltzer water with a lime. And it looks like, the casual observer, oh, yeah, do you want a drink? No, I have one. I'm good, thanks. And they're never really curious about what's in there. And I seem to be having as good a time as anyone else. And I've actually been accused of being quite hammered at some of these things because I was having so much fun. And now I'm at a point in my life where I can have fun, lots of fun in sobriety. And I can dance with the pretty girl in the room with my wife's permission, and I can interact socially because you talked about wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience. Okay, so I have to live my way through these things, and then they become easier. But the struggles in early sobriety are multiple and constant because we get hardwired to a certain way to do things. Oh my God, what are my buddies going to think if I won't drink with them? And some of them will have a negative reaction to my not drinking as they consider, do they have a problem? And oftentimes they will engage me about not drinking while they're drinking. And I just have to say, you know what? This is a great subject for us to pursue. Why don't you call me tomorrow?
I was going to say, tomorrow.
when they might be able to hear me, okay? And if they do pick up that phone, that could be a really positive thing, because then we can begin to analyze it and let them decide if they want to join the club I'm in.
Yeah, some people might say, take that opportunity, even though they're under the influence. And I can tell you many times professionally that people would call under the influence to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. And I'd be like, same way, call me tomorrow. And some will say, well, no, they're in crisis right now. And I said, no, that crisis has been going on for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. That's a repetitive. I'm not going to be part of the problem. I'm going to be part of the solution. And part of the solution is the willingness the next day, when that unfortunate guilt and shame rears its ugly head, that person is uncomfortable enough to then make that call the next morning or next afternoon. And believe me, as a human being, I'm sure you as well, me, whether it be a peer support, a friend in recovery, or a professional, a lot of those people don't make that call that next day. But some do. And those are the ones, again, from a recovery standpoint, not everybody gets that because there is, going back to what Chris said, has the true willingness and desire to change. They have it in their head, right? And this is with anything. Just say poor behavior, bad behavior. I'll use me as an example in regards to how to manage my emotions. I did it poorly. And I could tell you how many times my wife, 31 years, has said, you got to do something different. So whatever, right? What is from a global standpoint, what does recovery look like? And as you've kind of demonstrated through your life and in this short time we've had to have a conversation, not picking up a drink is one thing. Recovery is so much more, right?
Yeah, but it begins with, let's get the big symptom out of the way, okay? Because I can't really do a good, honest self-analysis of myself, an inventory, if you will. What's good, what's bad, what needs to change. And then how do I do that? Okay. I can't do that when I'm under the influence because I'm going, that's my go-to. I'm masking everything. I'm numbing it. I'm hiding from it, and all the while that low self-esteem is buried under a big ego bravado to the world, because that's my suit of armor, you know. But if I can strip some of that down and become vulnerable to change, you know, there are lots of support networks out there to complete that change with people who have done it. Just like we tutor the new guy on the roof on how to open it up and throw it off, and you know, it's the same thing. It's a skill that can be developed.
Were you tutoring me here? I mean, the roof is gone, isn't it? I mean,
well, you know, we saved the floorboards. Sometimes.
And speaking of fire, look at Chris's helmet back there.
Oh,
I mean,
come on.
that is, look at that thing. Seasoned.
You want me to go get mine out of the closet?
We're good.
I know he stopped you, but it's the this too again, right? I try to infuse different pieces, and Chris knows me well enough through besides this podcast, is that in recovery there's got to be humor, and I know he lets me pick on him a little bit, but me and you have done that for probably the better part of our 35-year relationship. And, you know, as I said in the beginning, if people aren't picking on you, they don't like you. And then do you take a self and moral inventory to see, okay, is it them or is it me?
Well, we often say in my fellowship, we're sober but not somber people. We have fun, and I'll tell you what, as a kid in his 20s trying to get better, I had to learn a whole bunch of stuff on social interactions and, you know, behavior in the firehouse, at a dance, walking down the street, driving in my car, you know. But it's all possible. It's all possible. You know, the sky's the limit. And, you know, it doesn't matter what circumstances put you on a path of recovery. Even if you don't want it, if you're just there for the wife or the job, you know, or the kids. If you expose yourself to recovery for a certain period of time, you'll want to go back for more appropriate reasons, centering on yourself in recovery rather than just circumstances of discipline, divorce, or other disaster. You know, it's out there. It's for the people who want it, but you can develop the desire by mere exposure to it. You'll see that it works for other people. And if it works for them, it can work for you. And you owe it to yourself to be open and to try. If you think you got a problem, odds are you got a problem. Okay. Just not too many people walk into a meeting by mistake. You know, we don't come in on winning streaks. So,
yeah. So, you know, for the audience that's listening or still listening, we always talk to our guests beforehand, and we're like, all right, we're going to talk for an hour. It's like, what are we going to talk about for an hour? And then the next thing you know, you look at the clock and the hour's done. So, you know, I could talk to Tim all day about stuff. And, you know, again, you don't get to 40 years of recovery overnight. And you said it in your conversation, one day at a time. So a lot of tidbits in recovery. You could have laughter, you could have a career, you could have success, you could have low self-esteem. You could have a family, and I don't know if you could become CEO of the year like you, but that is possible. I'm jesting. I really appreciate you as a person, as a friend, colleague. Not sure if I really appreciate the fact you beat me on all the exams, but I'm working on that. The purpose of this show, for anybody that was watching, hopefully you got the message, is that recovery is possible. No matter what the bottom is. And in order to do it, you have to surround yourself with people. Maybe not the same people that got you to that point where you got to change, right? But people, places, and things. And I look at Chris, and I kid with him at times. He's out in McKinney, Texas, big state. Whether we're in 50 different states, your story relates everywhere. I'm sure, Chris is a former captain, now as a blue shirt, as a union president, as a family man, as just a individual. He's had a lot of interactions with a lot of different people. And whether we're in Illinois or Texas or California or New York, we're all the same, and we need the same thing. And that thing is this table talk conversation. Start with that and find those people that are doing the next right thing, which you did for a lot of years. So really appreciate your time, Timmy. Chris, any last question, comments, concerns with Tim?
No, I appreciate you coming on. I think it's another episode where somebody out there maybe needs it, or they're in recovery, or they're in a lull, right? I think that you obviously are a fundamental example of it works when you make it work, right? And when you want it to work. And I mean, my gosh, from getting sober at 23, you said, and being a Chicago Fire Department squad guy, lieutenant, captain, battalion chief. I mean, you guys can smile, roll your eyes on that, but right, everyone always looks at people and they're like, "That guy's no way he has it," right? And has a problem, issue, whatever you want to call it, right? And it just goes to show you, we all have our own story, and the fact that you're vulnerable enough to share it, right? Then maybe that's all that one person needs today, is to see that somebody like you is vulnerable enough to share your story, and you can be this pillar of a big department like that, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. It's like I say, I've been given a lot of help along the way, and it's the old adage: if I ascended to the top of the mountain, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants. And we just try and carry that message. And I salute you both for being at the forefront of reaching out to people and making them aware. Hopefully those in need will reach out and find what they need for themselves or their family, because this is a family illness too, and the family can recover together.
Speaking of reaching out, I don't know what's the best way, how we've done it before. If somebody did watch this and want to chat with you, what can they find you on LinkedIn at least, right?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't pay much attention to that as much anymore. I put out my email. I'm on Facebook. You shoot me a direct message on that, I'd be happy to respond, especially if they're local to the Chicago area. I got a network of recovery wherever I am. I spend the winter in Florida, and I got a network down there too. I mean, this thing's universal. It's incredible. I got friends wherever I go. I just haven't met them yet.
Yeah, and I don't know if I mentioned, I think I mentioned in the beginning. So Tim Gibbons, right? Gibbons.
Yes.
Tim Gibbons. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, pleasure.
Pleasure's mine. We'll see you on the first tee, brother. In a couple hours.
Chris can't make it because he's got to go let his son drive his expense. Are you letting him drive the truck?
I've let him drive it a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of truck? Tell Tim.
It's a Ram 3/4 ton diesel.
Well, you're a Texas guy. I love that Cummins turbo diesel. I had one, and I love that truck.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, I got a 1500, and then he had to go out and one up me.
Get a real truck.
Yeah, exactly. I'm scared to drive a 3-ton.
They made the 1500s ride like Cadillacs.
Yeah. Tim, thanks a lot.
Okay, guys.
And if anybody reaches out to me, I'll send them your way as I usually have. So everybody out there in Firefighter Nation, thanks for joining us. And again, our guest, Timmy Gibbons.
See you next time.
Take care, guys. Peace.
Welcome to Mental Health Monthly with Dan DeGryse and Chris Muscle.